The exchanged children. Once there was a king who had a maid in his house to work for the queen. It can be assumed that a cook would not have been allowed into the king's presence, but this was a maid of low stature. The time for the queen and the maid to give birth coincided. The midwife went and switched the babies in order to see what would come of it and how the affair would turn out. She exchanged them, placing the child of the king next to the maid and the child of the maid next to the queen. The two children began to grow. The son of the king, that is the one who grew up as the king's child, for all thought he was the son of the king, ascended higher and higher until he became a great success. The son of the maid, that is the true son of the king, who is being raised by the maid, grew up in the same house and they learned together in one classroom. The true son of the king, who is called the son of the maid, was drawn to the graces of royalty, although he grew up in the care of the maid. On the other hand, the maid's son, who is known as the son of the king, was drawn to other manners, distinct from the manners of kingship. However, since he was being raised in the king's palace, he was obliged to behave in a kingly fashion according to the way they were raising him. Then the midwife, being that woman a light-headed, went and revealed the secret to a friend, and that friend to other friends, until the secret was passed on from one to another, as is the habit of people. Soon the whole world was murmuring about how the king's son had been exchanged. However, no one would talk about it openly, lest the king find out. Certainly the king could not be allowed to know, for what could he do? There was no way to repair the damage, for the rumor could not be believed with certainty. Perhaps it was a lie. How could they be switched back again? It was clearly impossible for them to reveal this thing to the king, but the people gossiped with each other about it. One day, someone revealed the secret to the purported son of the king, how people were saying that he had been switched. However, he continued, "It is not for you to investigate this, for it would not be in accord with your honor. You must not investigate it at all. All the same, I informed you of this because if a conspiracy were to develop against the monarchy, this would strengthen their position. They could say that they are adopting the maid's son as their king, that is the real son of the king. Therefore, you need to think of how to get rid of him." All these are the word of one who revealed the secret to the son of the maid, who is known as the son of the king. And the son of the king are used. In these cases, the meaning is to be taken on the simple level. Started to make life very difficult for the father of the servant's son, who was really his own father, and went out of his way to cause him pain all the time. He continually caused him trouble after trouble in order to force him and his son to leave. All the while that the king was still alive, the son was limited in his power, but nevertheless, he caused much suffering for the other son's father. After the king grew old and died, the king's son took the throne. Then he caused more harm to the father of the other son, trouble after trouble. He did it stealthily so that no one would know what he was doing. This would not be respected by the public, so he hid the matter. He caused him trouble all the time. The father understood that he was persecuting him because of the rumor. He told the son, who was really not his son, the whole story and said that he had great mercy on him. "Either way, if you are truly my son, then I certainly have much compassion for you. And if you are the true son of the king, then I certainly have even more compassion for you. For he wants to wipe you out completely, God forbid. Therefore, you must go far, far from here." This was very upsetting to him. However, the son of the king continued to shoot his arrows of malevolence at him, one after another, until the servant's son decided to leave. His father gave him a large sum of money and he went away. He was very resentful that he had been exiled for no reason. He said to himself, "How is it that I deserve to be banished? If I am really the king's son, I surely do not deserve it. And if I am only the servant's son, I still should not have to flee for no reason. What is my crime?" He was very bitter, and he thus took to drinking and visiting brothels. He wanted to pass all his days drunkenly pursuing his desires because of having been banished without justification. Meanwhile, the king ruled the nation with a strong hand, and when he heard people murmuring and gossiping about the exchange, he would deal with them cruelly. He ruled with intimidating might. One day, the king and his ministers went hunting and came to an attractive place beside a river. They made a camp there, rested, and went walking. The king lay down to rest, and this affair came to his mind, how he had banished the son of the servant without justification. Either way one considered, it seemed wrong. If he was really the son of the king, was it not enough that he was exchanged? Should he have to suffer banishment as well? After he was not the son of the king, he certainly did not deserve to be banished. What was his sin? The king thought about it and regretted the great sin and evil he had done. However, he had no idea what to do about it. He could not talk about it with anyone else to get advice. He thus became very depressed and told his ministers they would return home now. Since he was weighed down by worry, there was no point in continuing the excursion, so they returned home. When the king went back to his routine, he had a number of important issues to attend to. He became immersed in his affairs and forgot about the issue. Meanwhile, the true king's son, who had been banished and who had hid what he had done and wasted all his money, went alone on a trip. At one point, he lay down to rest and began thinking of all that had befallen him. He thought, "What is this that God has done to me? If I am the son of the king, I certainly don't deserve this. And if I am not, I also don't deserve it, to be banished as a fugitive." So he came to the conclusion, to the contrary, if God decided to do such a thing, to have the king's son replaced, and that he should endure all of this, am I justified in behaving the way I did? Was that appropriate behavior on my part? He began to feel sorry and to regret his deeds. But after that he returned home and went back to the drinking. Still, since he had started to regret, the thoughts of regret and repentance began to bother him all the time. One night he went to sleep and dreamed that in a certain place on a certain day there would be a fair. He should go there and accept the first job he would happen to find, even if it would be beneath his dignity. Then he awoke, but the dream entered deeply into his thoughts. Sometimes a thought passes immediately from one's mind, but this dream stayed on his mind. However, it was difficult for him to accept doing this, so he drank even more heavily. He dreamed the dream several times more, and it disturbed him greatly. Once he was told in the dream, "If you want to have pity on yourself, do this." He felt obliged to obey the dream. He left the remainder of his money in his lodgings, his expensive clothes. He took the simple working clothes and traveled to the fair. When he got there, he met a merchant who asked him, "Would you like to do some work?" "Yes," he answered. He said, "I need someone to lead my animals. Can I hire you for that?" He did not have a chance to think twice about it because of the dream. He answered immediately, "Yes," and the merchant hired him immediately. The merchant immediately began to use him domineeringly, as is the way of masters with their servants. He began to ask himself, "What have I done?" It certainly was not appropriate work for him. He was a tender person, and now he would have to lead animals, going on foot alongside them. However, it was too late to change his mind. The merchant commanded him in the way of a master. He asked the merchant, "How can I go alone with these animals?" He answered, "There are other shepherds working for me. Go with them." He gave him several animals to lead, and he brought them outside the city. There, the other shepherds who were leading animals gathered and began moving together, leading the animals. The merchant sat on a horse and went with them. He treated them cruelly, and the son of our story was treated with particular cruelty. The son was very frightened by the merchant, for he saw the great cruelty that was directed specifically at him. He feared that the merchant would give him one mighty whack with his stick and kill him. Being that he was frail, this appeared possible. He went with the animals, with the merchant accompanying. They came to a resting place. They took the sack of bread for the shepherds, and the merchant gave them to eat. They also gave the son bread, and he ate. After this, they went into a very thick forest, where the trees were practically adjacent to each other. Two animals that had been in the son's charge became lost. The merchants shouted at him, so he went to try to catch the animals, but they only escaped further away. He continued chasing because the forest was so thick. As soon as they entered it, they lost sight of one another. He immediately disappeared from the view of his companions. He went chasing after the animals, but they escaped even further. He chased a long time until he found himself deep in the forest. He thought to himself, "Either way I will die. If I return without the animals, the merchant will kill me. So it seemed to him, due to his great fear of the merchant, and if I stay here, I will die from the wild beasts of the forest. But he concluded, why should I go back to the merchant? How can I go back without the animals? He had a great fear of the merchant, so he continued chasing the animals, but they eluded him. Presently, night fell. He never before been in such a situation, sleeping alone in the night in a thick forest such as this. He heard the animals howling as was their nature. He decided to climb into a tree and sleep there, and he continued to hear the roaring of the animals. In the morning he looked, and behold, the animals were standing next to him. He came down from the tree and went to catch them, and they escaped again. He followed them further, but they escaped further. Then the animals found some grass and stood still to graze and eat. He tried to catch them there, but they escaped again. He would chase and they would escape repeatedly. Finally, he reached very deep into the forest where there were wild animals that had no fear of humans, for it was far from civilization. Night came again and he heard the howling of the animals, and he was terrified. He looked and saw a very great tree and climbed up into it. When he ascended the tree, he saw a man sleeping there and he was frightened. Nevertheless, it was comforting for him to have found another man. They asked each other, "Who are you, man? How did you come to be here?" But he did not want to tell the whole story, so he simply answered, "Because of the animals. I was shepherding animals and two of them strayed here. That is how I came here." Then he asked the other man, "How did you come to be here?" He answered, "I came here riding on a horse. I stopped to rest and the horse went and strayed into the forest. I went chasing after him and he escaped further until I came here." So they joined together to be a team. They agreed that even if they were to reach a settlement, they would stay together as a team. They slept there next to each other and heard the fearsome roaring of the animals. Towards morning, they heard a very mighty voice of laughter spreading through the whole forest. It spread throughout the forest because it was so powerful, until the tree shook and swayed from the voice. The son was extremely frightened from this. The second man said to him, "I already do not fear this at all. I have already slept here several nights, and every single night, near daybreak, I hear the sound of this laughter, until all the trees shake and tremble." The son was shocked and said to his companion, "It seems to me like a place of demons. In subtle places, one does not hear a voice of laughter like this. Who has ever heard a voice of laughter that fills an entire region?" Then immediately became day. They looked down and saw his animals standing there together with the other one's horse. They descended and began to chase them, this one after the animals and the other after the horse. The animals escaped further and the son chased them as before. The horse also escaped and the other man ran after it. Eventually, they were separated and lost each other. In the midst of this, the son found a sack of bread. That is surely very important in a wilderness. He took the sack on his shoulder and went after the animals. In the course of this, he came upon a man and was stunned by what he saw. Nevertheless, he was comforted to having met another man. The man asked him, "How did you come to be here?" He responded by asking the same question, "How did you come to be here?" The man responded, "I, my fathers, and my grandfathers grew up here. But you, how did you come here? People from civilization never come to this place." He was shocked at hearing this, for he understood that this was not a man at all. He said that his ancestors had been raised here, yet no man from civilization ever comes here. He understood that this was not a man at all. Nevertheless, the man did no harm and was friendly toward him. Then the man asked him, "What are you doing here?" He answered that he was chasing after the animals. The man then said, "Give up chasing after sins. Those are not animals at all, only your own sin that are leading you on. Enough! You have already suffered your punishment. Now cease chasing them anymore. Come with me and come to something that will give you satisfaction." He went with him. He was frightened of speaking or asking him questions, for such a man could open his mouth and swallow him. He understood that this was not a man at all, but he went after him. In the course of this, he met his friend who had been chasing after the horse. As soon as he saw him, he signaled to him, pointing to the other man, "This is not a man at all. Don't get involved with him, for he is not a man at all." He went to his friend and whispered all this in his ear. Then his friend looked at him and noticed a sack of bread he was carrying on his back. He started to beg him, "Brother, I haven't eaten for several days. Give me bread." He answered him, "Here in the wilderness, nothing has currency. My life comes first and I need the bread for myself." But he started to beg and plead with him, saying, "I'll give you all that I have." "But no gift or favor is worth bread in the wilderness," the other said. "What can you give me?" "What could you give me in place of bread in the wilderness?" The man with the horse answered, "I'll give you myself. I will sell myself to you for the bread." The man with the animals considered to himself, "If I can buy a man, it is worth giving him the bread." He thus bought him as a permanent slave. He had him swear that he would remain a slave even after they came to a civilization. He gave him bread. That is, they would eat together from the sack until it was finished. Together, they followed the man of the forest. The slave went behind the man with the animals. Having a slave made things a bit easier for him. When he needed to lift someone's heavy or needed some other type of help, he would command the slave to lift it and do his will. They went together after the man of the forest. Then they came to a place of spiders and snakes, and he was very afraid. Out of his fear, he asked the man of the forest, "How will we pass through this?" He answered him, "I have an even harder question. How will you reach my house?" With that, he showed him his house, which was suspended in air. "How will you come into my house?" They went on with the man with the forest, and he brought them over safely. He brought them into his house and gave them to eat and drink. Then he left them there. Now, this man, the true son of the king, who was also the man with the animals, used the slave for everything he needed. The slave was very resentful. For an hour, when he had needed some bread to eat, he had become a slave. But now, they had all they needed to eat. For the sake of 1 hour, he became a permanent slave. He sighed and groaned. "How did I come to such a state to be a slave?" The king's son, who was now his master, asked him, "What status did you have before that you sigh so at being a slave now?" So he told him that he had been a king, how they had murmured about him that he was exchanged. The man with the horse was in fact the son of the maid, who had acted as king and banished his friend. How once it occurred to him that he had not acted justly, how he regretted, and he was constantly plagued by regret at what he had done, the great evil he had committed against his friend. One time he dreamed that his rectification would be to give up the kingdom and go where his whim would lead him, and that through this his sin would be atoned. He did not want to do it, but the dreams kept haunting him, pushing him to do it until he decided he would. He abandoned the kingdom and went there. The road took him until he came here, and now he had become a slave. The other listened to all this and remained quiet. He said to himself, "I'll wait and see how I should deal with this one." In the evening, the man of the forest came and gave them to eat and drink. They slept there. In the morning, they heard the sound of the great laughter that shook and rocked all the trees. The slave tempted his master to ask the man of the forest to explain this. So he asked him, "What is the roaring sound of laughter that comes just before dawn?" He answered, "That is the sound of the day laughing at the night. The night asks the dawn, 'Why is it that when you come I have no name?' Then the day laughs and lets out an enormous bellow, and then it becomes day. That is the sound of laughter you hear." It was amazing to him. It is a wonder that the day laughs at the night. In the morning, the man of the forest returned and then left again. They ate and drank there. At night, they heard the voice of the wild beasts, all roaring and howling with their various voices, each one with a unique character. The lion roared, the panther howled in a different voice, and the birds all chirped and twittered with their voices. All of them called out with a different voice. At first, the men were shocked and did not listen attentively to their fear. But afterwards they turned their ears and heard that it was a very wondrous voice of song and melody, a sublime delight to hear. All of the delights of the world were as nothing, insignificant and meaningless in comparison with the awesome delight of this melody. They agreed to stay there, for they had enough to eat and drink, and they could enjoy the sublime delight, next to which all other delights were as nothing. The slave again urged his master to ask the man of the forest to explain the melody. He answered, "This is the matter of the garment the sun made for the moon." All the beasts of the forest concurred, being that the moon does them a great favor, for the main rule is at night, and the moon shines for them. They agreed to sing a new song in honor of the moon, who accepted their garment from the sun, and that is what the melody you hear. When they heard that it was a melody, they paid attention more closely and perceived that it was a very awesome and sweet melody. Then the man of the forest said to them, "This is such a novelty to you. I have in my possession an instrument that was passed down to me from my fathers, who received it from their father's father. It is made from leaves and colors, such that when one lays the instrument upon the beast or bird, it immediately starts to sing this melody." After this, the laughing sound was heard again, and it became day. The man of the forest left, and the man who was the true son of the king started searching for the instrument. He searched the whole room without finding it, and he feared looking any further. Both of them, that is the master who was the true son of the king and the slave who was really the son of the maid, he knew had held the throne for a time, were afraid to ask the man of the forest to take them to civilization. The man of the forest returned, took the instrument and gave it to the true son of the king, saying, "I give this instrument to you, and as for your slave, know how to deal with him." Then they asked him, "Where are we to go?" He answered that they should inquire after the country known as the foolish country with the wise king. They asked, "Where should we begin asking after a country such as this?" The man pointed with his finger in that direction. Then he said to the true son of the king, "Go there to that state, and there you will come to your greatness." They went on their way. They longed to find some animal or beast on which to try the instrument to see if it would play, but they did not see any animal. Later they came to a settlement and found a farm animal, placed the instrument on it, and it began to play. They went on until they came to the above-mentioned country. The country was surrounded by a wall, and one could only enter through one gate. One needed to follow the wall a long way until one came to the gate. So they followed the wall until they arrived at the gate. Those at the gate did not want to let them enter, for the king of the country had died, and his son had taken his place. The king had left a will stating, "Though until now the country had been named the foolish country with the wise king, now it will be called the wise country with the foolish king. Whoever restores it to the first name, the foolish country with the wise king, will become king." Therefore, they would not let anyone enter save one who could accomplish this. They did not want to let him enter, and they asked him, "Can you restore the country to its former name?" He was not prepared to take on such a thing, so they were not able to enter. The slave urged him to return home, but he did not want to, for the man of the forest had told him to go to this country, and that here he would find his greatness. In the course of this, another man came riding on a horse and also wanted to enter. They also did not let him enter for the same reason. Meanwhile, the son of the king noticed the man's horse standing there, and he took the instrument and laid it on the horse, and it started to play. The wondrous melody described before. The owner of the horse pressed him to sell him the instrument, but he was not willing. He asked him, "What can you give me in exchange for such a marvelous instrument?" The other one asked him in return, "What can you accomplish with the instrument? You can only perform a concert and earn a dinar. But I know something that is better than your instrument. I know something that I inherited from my ancestors that can enable one to understand one thing from another, so that when someone makes a statement, it is possible through this tradition I have to understand one thing from another. Until now, I have not revealed this to any other man, but I will teach it to you if you give me the instrument." The son of the king considered and saw that it was truly a remarkable thing to understand one thing from another. He gave the man his instrument, and the man taught him how to understand one thing from another. Then the son of the king, after having learned to understand one thing from another, went back to the gate of the country. He saw that he really could accept the challenge to return the country to its first name, for he had become able to understand one thing from another. He saw that it was possible, though he still did not know how he would do this, and he had become able to understand one thing from another, and he saw that it was possible. He decided to demand that they let him enter, and he would take this on. What else could he lose? He told the guards who had not yet anyone entered to let him in, and he would accept the challenge, so they let him in. They informed the ministers of the country that there was now a man willing to try to restore the country to its original name. They brought him to the ministers, and the ministers said to him, "We are not foolish, heaven forbid. It is only that the former king had been amazingly wise, and compared to him we are as fools. That is why it was called a foolish country with the wise king. Then the king died, leaving his son in his place. He is also wise, but compared to us he is not wise at all. Therefore the country now has the opposite name, the wise country with the foolish king. And the king left a will, saying that he who was wise enough to restore the country to its former name would become king. He commanded his son that when such a man would be found, he should abdicate the throne and that the man would become king. That as such a wise man would have to be found, that in comparison to him, everyone else would be a fool and he would become king. Such a man could return the country to its first name, for people would again start calling it the foolish country with the wise king. They would all be as fools compared to him. Thus know what it is you are talking about. All the ministers said to him. The ministers continued, this will be the test. If you are such a wise man, there is a garden from the days of the previous king who had been very great in wisdom. The garden is very impressive. Instruments of metal, of silver and gold grow there, and it is very wondrous and awesome. However, it is impossible to enter, for when one enters, they immediately start chasing him. They chase him until he screams and he does not know what is happening or who is chasing him. They chase him all the way out of the garden. Therefore, we will see if you are truly wise if you could enter this garden. He asked them if one would be beaten physically there. They said, the main thing is the chasing. The person does not know who is pursuing and he flees in great terror. This is how people who have entered had described it to them. He went to the garden, that is the true son of the king, and saw that there was a wall surrounding it. The gate was open and no one was guarding it. Certainly this garden needed no guards. He went along the edge of the garden. He looked and saw a man standing there by the wall, or more correctly, a statue of a man. He saw that above the man was a placard, and on it was written that this man had been king several hundred years ago, and in his time there had been peace. Before him there had been wars, and so after him, but in his time there had been peace. He perceived that everything was dependent on this man, for he was able to understand one thing from another. When one entered the garden and they began chasing him, one did not need to flee at all, only to stand by this man, and he would be saved. More than this, if they took this man and placed him inside the garden, everyone would be able to enter it in peace. The true son of the king understood all this because of his ability to know one thing from another. He went and entered the garden, and as soon as they started chasing him, he went and stood by the man, and stood just outside the garden, and through this left in peace without any harm. Others who had entered the garden and had been chased would flee in very great terror, emerging beaten and hurt, but he emerged in peace and serenity by having stood by the statue. The ministers saw in disbelief that he had come out in peace. The true son of the king commanded that the statue be placed inside the garden. They did this, and then all the ministers were able to go through the garden, entering and leaving in peace without any harm. The ministers said to him, even though you accomplished this, it is still not fitting to give you the kingdom on the basis of one feat. We will give you one more test. There is this throne of the former king, and it is very high. Next to the throne are wood carvings of all sorts of birds and beasts. And before the throne stands a bed. By the bed stands a table, and on the table stands a lamp. From the throne extends roads, and the roads are lined by walls. These roads extend from the throne in every direction. No man understands the meaning of the throne and the roads. On one of the roads, after having stretched out some distance, stands a lion of gold. If a man comes near it, it swallows him. Beyond the lion, the road stretches further. So with the other roads extending from the throne, on the second road, after it was extended from the throne some distance, stands another type of example, a metal tiger. It is also impossible to come close to it, and so with the other roads. These roads extend and spread out across the whole country. No man understands the matter of the throne with all these items near it, and the roads leading from it. Therefore you will be tested in this, if you can understand the matter of the throne and the other elements surrounding it. They showed him the throne, and he saw that it was very high. He went and looked at the throne and realized that this throne was made from the wood of the instrument, the one that the man of the forest had given him. He looked carefully and saw that at the top of the throne a rose was missing. and that if the missing rose would return to its place, the throne would have the power of the instrument that had the power to play when it was laid upon some animal. He looked further and saw that this rose that was missing from the top of the throne was lying at the bottom of the throne. It was needed only to lift up the flower and place it above, and then the throne would have the power of the instrument. The former king had done everything cleverly, in such a way that no one would understand the matter until a master of wisdom would come who would understand and who would be able to switch and arrange everything in its proper order. He saw that the position of the bed needed to be shifted slightly, that the table needed to be fixed slightly, and its position changed slightly, and that the lamp's position needed to be slightly shifted. Also, the birds and the beasts needed their position shifted slightly, to take a bird from that place and to put it in this place. Similarly with everything, the king had done everything with cleverness and wisdom, such that no one would understand until the wise man would come and discover the correct arrangement. Similarly with the lion that stood on the road, it needed to be put in another place, and so with all of them. He commanded that everything be put in its proper place, and then they all began to play the wonderful melody, and they all fulfilled their appropriate functions, and they gave him the kingdom. Then the true son of the king, who now himself had become king, said to the son of the king, of the maid, "Now I understand that I am truly the son of the king, and you are truly the son of the maid."